Hi, thank you for joining us. Today we have a very special guest, our newly elected school board chair for Oklahoma City Public Schools, Paula Lewis. Paula, thanks for coming today.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me. It's been about 8 weeks now that I've been the chair, and I'd been on the board for a year before that. It's the same and different all at the same time.
Right.
But I appreciate you being willing to put the spotlight on education today.
Right. So many people are energized by your campaign and now you taking the helm. Can you talk about how you got here? I mean, what's inspired you to be on the school board and now as chair?
Yeah, absolutely. My kids, probably the number one thing were my kids. I have a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. And my 15-year-old, we've struggled on some aspects of school. And as we left private school in 3rd grade, went into public school, and just kind of learning how to get through the system, because it is a big system, 46,000 kids, 80 different schools. And teachers are busy, and they're underpaid and overworked and love kids, but it's still hard to get to them. And I just became real involved at a PTA level. And then through time, you learn that you could make a bigger push for change for all kids as a board member. So a year ago, I became District 4's board member. And after sitting on the board for a year, I felt that there were some things we could do better. We did some great things all the time, but we need superintendent stability. And that was probably my big push for running, was to try to work with the board to become a better governing body, to support Superintendent Laura, and to hold her accountable for educating our kids. And so that was the main reason for doing this.
You have a healthcare background, and I think I've heard you talk about mental health and kind of thinking about trauma that I haven't really heard other people talk about in the same way. Can you talk about that?
For sure. Mental health care has a stigma, and we all know it has a stigma, but when we really look at the kids that we work with in Oklahoma City Public School, over 80% of our kids are eligible for free and reduced, which means they're eligible for they're living in poverty, and we expect that 50% of those kids are living in extreme poverty. And while poverty is never an active ingredient to not being educated or not being able to be educated, what we see associated with extreme poverty as well as poverty are things that are very important, safety and security and enough food, and those can be associated with trauma. If you're hungry every night, that's a trauma. If you have a parent who's incarcerated, and we have one of the highest incarceration rates of women in the nation, that's trauma. I mean, and you can take it to abuse, but we have many of our kids that are coming from a trauma-based brain, and that catches them in fight or flight or freeze. They get stuck in the amygdala. There's mapping out there, brain mapping, that says they're not shooting synapses to their learning cortex, their learning centers, and that equals out to discipline. So we see kids acting out, and we hear that we have discipline problems in OKCPS. Well, we do have discipline problems, but not the discipline problems that perhaps you and I saw when we were in school. Not just Johnny threw the baseball through the window anymore. These are acting out because they can't get out of that trigger zone. They can't move past that. And so we need wraparound services. We need to really look at removing these barriers for kids so that they can be educated. They can't have the capability to learn because they have brains, they're powerful brains, but they're locked into a part of them that's not letting them get there.
Well, I appreciate you interjecting that into the communal discourse, because people talk about funding, they debate about consolidation or different ideas, but they don't really talk about what you've been talking about, which is that we have to address these aspects. What can we do as a school district and in our schools? I know that funding restricts some ability, but if you had the funding, how would you address trauma?
Well, one of the things that I would like to see before my 4-year tenure is up is that we have a licensed counselor, not a school counselor, but someone who's really licensed, trained for counseling in the emotional disturbances in every school all day long, so that there's a support system in place. And we're working on some things. I mean, we've got the Family Justice Center has reached out to us to try to maybe connect some dots for us on that. We've got the Compact is looking at a mental health task force to try to move that forward to see if we can bring wraparound services. But it does cost money, and we do have some ability to move some of our Title I funding into counselors, but we also have ability to use that for teachers. And so because we are underfunded, that's a tough call. I mean, yes, we need wraparound services, and we need social work to help connect community resources for parents and kids, because we have these kids 8 hours a day. 16 hours a day is where we need to help them, as well as during the 8-hour learning. But funding would be significant. I mean, we're at 3,100 per pupil, and that's at least half of the national, it's well below the national average, like 30 to 40% below. And if we could get class sizes smaller, we know that that would help discipline problems, because that would have less kids who are struggling with the same problems in the same classrooms, and we would give teachers more one-on-one times with kids. And that's all the studies show, is that one-on-one time helps with this, and groups can trigger this. While you need to learn to work in a group, you also have to have your one-on-one time, building time. So funding would be huge for that.
So funding is really not just about teacher salaries or support staff salaries, it's also class size, and that has an impact on our performance.
Absolutely, it has an impact, because you can look at teachers' salaries. So if we pay teachers, even if we didn't $20,000 more a year, but we up their class size to 40 kids, is that really going to be a better job? Or if their salary stayed the same and we cut their class sizes in half, because the workload increases or decreases exponentially. So we all agree that teachers need more money, but they also need a more suitable working environment to where they feel like they can go in and make a difference every single day.
Is that a concern that people may address the political? We've had a lot of discussion about teacher salary, but they might increase the teacher salary, but at the same time make it more difficult for them by increasing class size?
Yes, it's a real concern, a very real concern, because there is so much money. There's only so much money in the state level, and if they raise teacher salaries, which we all agree, that's going to pull from other places, because we're not getting the revenue in that we need. And so if we lost $30 million last year, we're hoping $10 million is the max that they cut this year. Could be as up to $16 million. But even to say we only lost $30 million last year, we've been almost $3 million short in our last 3 months of wire transfers coming from the state, because they're not making their budget. The revenue's not hitting the budget marks. And so when you look at that, we know that we're going to increase class sizes. And we're going to decrease the amount of teachers in the classroom, and we're going to lose certified teachers. We're going to lose good teachers to other districts who have smaller class sizes and make more money.
We get adverse national attention. We've had representatives talk about unconstitutional measures, rounding up English as a second language kids. They're really unfortunate things that create headwinds against us as a city and as a state. We've led the country in education cuts over the last decade. And still, it seems like the people of Oklahoma City are with you. And I've actually seen some polling that really speaks very strongly to this, that the people are with Oklahoma City schools. They're rooting for you. They want to help.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to them about the successes? I mean, some things that you're very proud of and that you see going forward.
Yes, for sure. And I will say you're right. I mean, they are behind us. I mean, it's very evident that we have people wanting to do things different and wanting change for public education. And my campaign was very evident of that. We turned out higher numbers that day, than almost 40% higher than we're expected to turn out that day, for people wanting someone to help with public education. And so I do feel like we have the support we need to move forward. And we have a good school system. We do have issues to work on. We have things that we could do better, for sure. We have some of the top elementary schools in the state. We had the high school state principal of the year was out of John Marshall. We have class and SAS and Harding are always rated high across the nation. So we have good schools. We have some real specific things we do well too. We have STEAM programs that are running after school out at Moon, that are introducing kids who don't have enrichment opportunities to STEAM, engineering, mathematics, aeronautical. And we have a community school at Edgemere that has all of their extracurricular brought in from the community. They have artists coming in, they have musicians coming in. We have communities that are coming around neighborhood schools and raising money to fund art teachers and science teachers. We're bringing in another alternative school on the south side of town that's going to look very much like Emerson. So that we don't have to have kids busing so long to get to those, because we are graduating extremely high numbers compared nationally with girls who've had babies. Emerson's doing a good job of graduating them. Boys that have had long-term suspensions are graduating. And so we're going to do that so that we can keep those kids in-house. We can keep them in front of instructional teachers longer, because we have waiting lists. to get into those schools. There's a new program south. It's called Summit Base Camp, and it's a pilot program, and we're using it, I think, 3 schools on the south side, and it's what's called blended learning. So it's half computerized or internet, and there's a teacher in the classroom, and the teachers say it's great. They say they're having to reinvent how they think about teaching, but they're seeing kids like that in the 4th grade that they finished 4th grade on this Summit Base Camp halfway through the year. So if we hadn't had that base camp in there, that would have been the kid that might have been bored and been the discipline problem. But now we're allowing kids to progress at their own rate, but we're also still having them learn how to work in groups and societal expectations. And we have cut down our long-term suspensions. I mean, we have.
Right.
Pretty significantly when I saw the last numbers. Yeah.
Right. A lot of citizens, I think, want to get involved. They're frustrated that the legislature is not really doing their job and helping our schools. Can you talk about the Edgemere elementary experiment and how the communities can get involved with their local school?
Yes, and volunteers are what we absolutely need. And I hear the stories too that say, well, we wanted to volunteer, but we weren't received, and we're working hard on that. Right. And that comes down to a strong leader in every building and a strong teacher in every classroom. Right. The strong leader at Edgemere, Principal Stieg, and we have Kelly Pearson, who is the lead of Friends of Edgemere. And that group came around that school about 3 years ago, I believe, is when we started the community program, the Dave Lopez community program. And what they did was they said, we know our kids need these things in order for them to feel safe and secure. So they have a nurse that comes in if the kids are sick, they can take care of it. It also serves the parents. That's the thing, is that the parents can use that as well. Right. They offer English classes at night, so people who are primarily Spanish speaking, they can help the parents feel more secure in the school. They're teaching them to garden, the paseos wrapped around them with all kinds of art experiences. I believe it's OCU that's doing the strings program for them. I could be wrong on that one. Right. But what it shows is that we know that a vacant building in the middle of our cities hurts neighborhoods. Right. We've closed them. We need them back. I mean, we've closed many schools on the south side of town, and now the south side of town houses 52% of our kids and way less than 50% of our schools. So now we have to run bonds to build schools, and we have overcrowded classrooms. So we have to keep those buildings, and we have to figure out how to bring kids back to our district, because it is, with low funding, you need a certain amount of kids in every school to be able to pay the bills. Right. Yeah, period.
I've heard, I mean, there seems to be consensus that the key to neighborhood revitalization is improvement in our schools, supporting our schools. The chamber will tell us that company retention and recruiting new businesses all has to do with the schools, and yet the funding just doesn't seem to be there. I mean, it seems like we understand the concepts, but our legislature is not in tune with what the people of Oklahoma City want. It doesn't seem like the legislature reflects what the desires of the people of Oklahoma City. And again, I've seen some polling that I think speaks very strongly to that the people of Oklahoma City want the schools funded, and they're tired of the inactivity. If that comes, that would be great. Until that day comes, how can citizens, is there a way, if they want to volunteer, if they want to get involved in their local school, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the funding. And sometimes when I hear people talk about funding, they're like, well, it's a failing district, so why would we give you more money? Well, I don't think you can starve a system into success. Right. And so I feel like, first of all, we're not failing. If you walk into any of our schools today, you're going to see kids learning. Right. And that's the misnomer, is that kids aren't learning. They are learning. Right. They have barriers to achieving what we've set these national averages to look like. Right. So funding is the answer on that. Right. For people getting involved, the foundation is the #1 best place to go. And Mary Malone is the head of the foundation. They are a powerful group. They just rolled out Read OKC yesterday. Right. But you can go to Donors Choose, which is, you can just see everything that any teacher in the district says they want. It could be from, a $10,000, set of instruments to $100 worth of bean bags, for their room. Right. You can do that. You can also, there's Partners in Action. Right. So, and that can be from one person being a partner in action specifically to a huge corporation being a partner in action. But the #1 thing is talking to your legislatures, but also, I would encourage them to reach out to the city. And is there something the city can do to help us fund our schools? And possibly there is. Right. The city, I understand, is struggling too on, sales tax and things. But I believe that strong schools and strong OK CPS schools is the next great thing that the city needs to go on top of the renaissance that we're seeing.
Right. Certainly, the city has worked strongly with
Yeah.
the school board in the past, and hopefully that's a possibility in the future. I want to thank you again for coming. What in terms of, let me just mention the read first. That is as we're getting ready for summer break. That's an opportunity for children to continue to read during the summer.